Hi, it's Pete Andresen with Andresen Associates. We are fee-only investment advisors in Salinas, California. And I just wanted to make a quick video today because one of my favorite historians, he's actually I guess you'd say, a historical economist. How about that? Neil Ferguson issued a statement earlier today. He was giving a talk in Italy, and it's likely to hit the media pretty hard, and that was that he said, why can't the next decade be worse than the 1970s? And as you know, the 1970s featured stagflation, inflation, political turmoil, social unrest, all kinds of issues. It was a rough decade in many ways. I was in the Marine Corps, so I remember a great deal of that, but his comments were well-founded and I wanted to address them. So what if it's going to get bad? Right now, the financial markets are basically acting as though it isn't going to get bad, that everything's going to just heal itself up in the next couple of months and everything's going to be fine. We would be 3,000 points lower on the Dow in the stock market if people really were feeling the pressure of an oncoming recession, perhaps, which we don't know we'll have, or if they were feeling that inflation is more than transitory, or if they'd even looked at the school scores that came out yesterday about the damage done to elementary school students by the pandemic. As you know, it's my working theory that that this pandemic is going to play out over the next decade or so, and I believe that this is part of it, this uncertainty and this potential turbulence. I'm going to put the link to Neil Ferguson's comments in the description and in the comments down below. And I'm going to put a link to my December 2021 video that I made discussing what I thought was going to happen, because most of the concerns that he brought up were listed in that video in December of 2021. So I'll put that in both the description and the comments. Okay, nobody has a crystal ball. All this talk of doom and gloom that's been coming out is a normal media thing. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. Nobody has a crystal ball. It's absolutely astonishing how wrong we all are about the future. Financial markets can go way, way down like they did in the 1970s and like they did in the first decade of the 21st century as well. My opinions in no way guarantee investment success. That the guarantee part actually have been pretty successful over time. Perfection is, so far as I know, impossible. So it's going to be a blundering process. Now, today, September 2nd, a famous economist, Neil Ferguson, opined that the coming decade may be far worse than the 1970s. I'm actually a fan of Dr. Ferguson, especially his work. But let's take a look at this graph here because it's kind of interesting. As you can see from the 1969 high right here, the stock market basically didn't do anything until 1982. If you add the much greater than we've ever experienced since inflation, and you add the rest of the turmoil, that meant that the stock market went backwards in terms of real purchasing power. But it did not collapse. It was not the Great Depression. In fact, I can show you later that the Great Depression itself wasn't the Great Depression of myth. But anyway, the 1970s were a tough time, but not apocalyptic, especially if you were buying down here in the downturn. And that's what I'm basing our future on. Like a broken record, I've been warning about possible excesses for the past 5 years, and I've been wrong because of the Federal Reserve stimulating. Now, Dr. Ferguson's comments are that the Fed has painted itself into a corner, as I've said, and he may be right, or he might not be right. There are some reasons to believe that the coming years will be challenging, but it's also absolutely true. This fact we know, and that is that we don't know what will happen. I'm going to put the YouTube video I made in December into the comments, as well as the description of this video. Please go check that out in detail. And you'll see what I was worried about then. They're all still concerns. One of the challenges of investing is that it takes great patience. And right now it's like watching turtles race, isn't it? The other thing I would say is that we all experience historical moments when the world tends to decadence. And that means decadence means that we are focused on the short term. We're focused on our own enrichment. We're focused on our own immediate needs. Decadence usually happens after boom time, after things have been really, really easy. When politics gets decadent, as it is now, when geopolitical events are decadent, as they are now, that's the normal reaction to a pretty good decade that went before. We get through them and we move on. The other thing is that we do live in an error-filled world wherein big people, presidents and Congress and all kinds of governments and billionaires and corporations make giant errors. It's brutal, it's horrible, and we get through it. And that's the core lesson. We have to act in a non-decadent way ourselves to get through this. Now, Vanguard already has been saying this. If you look at the graph, I know it's a little challenging. The light tan is what they had, the expectations as of the end of last year. And as of June 30th of 2022, this is what they expected. And as you can see, they started the year not expecting a great deal. And the decline in the stock markets, the worst start to the year, 2022 featured the worst start to a year in the financial markets that we've had in a long, long time, perhaps even 100 years, perhaps even since the 1930s, especially in the bond markets. But as you can see, they're not expecting much. And we're dealing with that as a reality. So we're already not expecting a great deal. But there's a couple of core things here that we just got to pick up. Okay, Vanguard is not owned by any Wall Street billionaires. Vanguard is owned by the shareholders. So this is not designed to sell you something and not designed to sell me something. It may be wrong, but at least its motivation is not decadent. So let's take a look at this thing. And what it's saying is that international is going to outperform American pretty overtly. If you get up to the upper end of their expectation of 8.1%, that's actually a pretty normal rate of return. So why? And the answer, again, looking at that December video, is that the American stock market has just gotten so incredibly overvalued. Hidden in this statistic also is the idea that perhaps we haven't seen the bottom yet. Again, could be wrong, but the idea that we haven't seen the bottom of the 2022 lows is very much alive. But let's look again at the 1970s. One of the things that happened was, while all the social unrest was unraveling and the media was shrieking about how the world was ending, people sold out of the stock market while the economy continued to grow. So compared to gross domestic product, this is a graph of gross domestic product, we went from 1969, where we had the stock market was basically worth 1.2 times gross domestic product. We ended up with the gross domestic product by 1982 of about 40%. So in the stock market essentially went sideways, but it was becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And while that was happening, gigantic, epic, marvelous, can't miss bargains were unfolding. And those bargains have made people so wealthy that this effect is still being felt today in the wealth that we have across the United States. So should we enter the 1970s again? Should Dr. Ferguson be right? We want to be able to be buying and picking and choosing and fighting all the way down. And we want to hire mutual fund managers who can do that all the way down. Is that a certainty? Absolutely not. We do not know what will happen, except change and uncertainty. Another thing to keep deeply in mind that really motivates me here is that the 1970s were part of long-term success. It takes great courage, persistence, patience to invest successfully, to grow wealth of any kind. Talk to your local millionaire, talk to your rich brother-in-law or whatever, and you'll find out that there's always challenging times, and there's always challenging years or multiple years. There's times when life just sucks, okay? And that's when you have to find the courage and do it. We're not walking in leading with our chin. We're diversified right now. But should we go through the 70s again, we're going to keep in mind that, like the 1970s, it's most likely an opportunity to lay the brickwork, the foundation for future wealth, which we will do carefully and with wisdom. Change is the only constant. Sometimes change happens fast. Sometimes it happens slow. Sometimes it just seems like the whole world has ended. If you remember things like 9/11. This is a Filipino Air Force pilot taking on a Japanese bomber on December 8th, 1941, when his world changed, and he's flying a extremely obsolete aircraft, and yet he's busy shooting down that bomber. Liminality, that is moving from change to change. That's like being the new kid at school or moving to a new town. We're all going through that, not just when we do something obvious, but when we buy a new car, or when we have a crash and lose the car we had, or when we have marital changes, or when we have political changes, or when we turn on the TV and the news comes out. That happens every night. But liminality is normal. We're in today's environment, it's always changing. And yet some themes are constant. And some of those themes are that courage is a requirement for life, for a successful life. Trust to some degree, I mean, intelligent trust, let's just call it that, is a requirement. Caution is also a requirement. This is not the time to bet the farm. We don't know what will happen. But right now, we are cautious, and we can't get out of the way of a lumbering locomotive, whatever that's going to be. We can't entirely avoid it, but we're ready to buy bargains. So absolutely. Again, look for those links in the description and down below in the comments. Thank you very much. I'm wishing you all the best as we face this very interesting year. Blessings.